The Vethkai had never known defeat. In 300 years of conquest across the stars, no species had ever made them retreat. No enemy had ever made them afraid. They were the supreme predators of the galaxy, and they knew it. Supreme Warlord Kethrava stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the battle unfold on the holographic display. Below him, the planet Palax Prime burned. Its cities were in ruins. Its defenders were dead or running. Another world was falling to the Dominion, just as hundreds had fallen before. The Vethkai were terrifying creatures. They came from a low-gravity world where they had evolved to be perfect killing machines. Each warrior stood 12 feet tall and for powerful legs. Their bodies were covered in natural armor that could stop most projectile weapons. Their forearms ended in blades of bone that could cut through steel. Their eyes could see in complete darkness, and their hearing could detect a heartbeat from 50 meters away. But their greatest weapon was their confidence. The Vethkai believed absolutely in their own superiority. They had conquered species that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. They had defeated civilizations with technology far more advanced than their own. They had done this through sheer aggression, through refusing to ever stop, through being willing to sacrifice everything for victory. No species had ever matched their will to fight. Kethrava clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as the last defensive platform above Palax Prime exploded. The coalition that had tried to defend this system had been pathetic. 6 species had pooled their resources, combined their fleets, and made their stand here. They had thought numbers would save them. They had been wrong. The battle had lasted 9 days. In that time, the Vethkai had destroyed over 2,000 enemy ships. They had killed millions of soldiers. They had broken the spirit of 6 civilizations that had dared to resist. Now those civilizations would serve the Dominion, as all conquered peoples served. Supreme Warlord. One of his officers reported, "The surface resistance is collapsing. Their government has fled to underground bunkers. Should we pursue? Let them hide," Kethrava replied. "They will come out eventually. They always do. Hunger and despair are reliable weapons." He turned away from the display and walked to the great window at the front of the bridge. Below him, Palax Prime was a beautiful world of blue oceans and green continents. Soon it would be stripped of resources, its people put to work in Dominion factories and mines. Another prize for the endless expansion of Vethkai power. 70 billion civilians lived in the Palax systems. 70 billion new subjects for the Dominion. Some would resist. Some would try to fight back. They would learn, as all conquered peoples learned, that resistance only brought suffering. 3 days later, Kethrava stood on the steps of the Palax Parliament building and addressed the conquered. The building behind him was still smoking from the bombardment. Bodies of defenders littered the plaza. Millions watched through cameras that broadcast his image across all 6 occupied worlds. "People of the Palax Coalition," he said, his voice translated into their languages. "Your war is over. Your governments have surrendered. Your fleets are destroyed. Your soldiers are dead or captured. You now belong to the Vethkai Dominion." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Some of you are thinking of resistance. You are imagining that you might fight back, that you might somehow overthrow your new masters. Let me tell you now that this is impossible. The Vethkai have conquered 412 species. Not one has ever freed itself from our rule. Not one has ever defeated us in battle. We have never retreated. We have never surrendered. We have never known fear." He spread his forearms wide, his blade tips gleaming in the sunlight. "You are not special. You are not different. You are simply the latest addition to our empire. Work hard, obey your overseers, and you will live. Resist, and you will suffer. This is the only choice you have." He turned and walked back into the ruined building. Leaving the conquered to their despair. In the weeks that followed, the occupation began in earnest. Vethkai soldiers patrolled the streets of every major city. Factories were seized and converted to produce goods for the Dominion. The strongest civilians were taken to labor camps. The rest were left to survive as best they could on reduced rations and constant surveillance. But even in the darkest times, hope finds a way to survive. In a small refugee ship hiding in the outer reaches of the Palax system, a group of survivors huddled around a communication console. They were scientists, diplomats, and engineers who had escaped the final battle. Their ship was damaged and low on fuel. They had nowhere to go. We have to try, said Mira then, a Palax diplomat who had spent her career building bridges between species. There must be someone out there who can help. Who? Asked her companion, a Telluri engineer named Voss. The coalition is broken. Every species within 100 light years is either conquered or too afraid to intervene. What about the outer regions? The species beyond Dominion space? Voss shook his head. We know almost nothing about them. Some are as primitive as we were 1,000 years ago. Others are complete mysteries. Mira pulled up a star chart on the console. She pointed to a yellow star in a region marked as unexplored. What about them? The humans? Humans. Voss examined the data they had on the species. They are young, barely spacefaring for 200 years. A small territory. No significant military presence. They cannot possibly help us. But they responded to the coalition's general distress call last month. They offered medical supplies and refuge for civilians. Offering supplies is not the same as fighting the Vethkai. Mira stared at the star on the map. Sol, the humans called it. Their homeworld was the third planet in the system, Earth. She had read reports about them during her diplomatic career. They were strange creatures, these humans. Soft-bodied, relatively weak, short-lived. They should have been insignificant, but something in those reports had stuck with her. Humans had a history of warfare that was unusually extensive for such a young species. They had fought each other constantly before unifying. They had nearly destroyed themselves with weapons of incredible destructive power. And then, somehow, they had stopped. They had chosen peace over extinction. A species that could pull itself back from the edge of self-destructs might understand something about survival that others did not. We have nothing to lose, Mira said quietly. Everyone else has abandoned us. The Vethkai will hunt down every ship that escaped. We have days at most before they find us. If there is even a small chance that the humans will help, we have to take it. Voss looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I will prepare the transmission. What do you want to say? Mira thought about all the diplomatic protocols she had learned. All the formal phrases and careful wordings. None of them seemed adequate for this moment. Keep it simple, she said. Send them our coordinates. Send them the casualty figures. And send them one word. What word? Please. The transmission went out into the void, traveling at the speed of light toward a distant yellow star. Mira did not know if anyone would receive it. She did not know if the humans would care. She only knew that she had done everything she could. 3 weeks passed. The refugee ship drifted in the darkness, its power running low, its food supplies nearly exhausted. Vethkai patrols were getting closer. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered. Then the communication console lit up with an incoming message. Mira scrambled to the console, her heart's pounding. The message was short, just 4 words, transmitted from somewhere very far away. We are coming. Hold. She stared at the screen, not quite believing what she was seeing. Voss read the message over her shoulder. That is it. He asked, no details, no timeline, no explanation of what they plan to do. That is it, Mira whispered. This could mean anything. They could be sending a single ship. They could be sending diplomats to negotiate. They could be coming to evacuate refugees. This does not mean they will fight. Mira read the message again. 4 simple words, but something about them made her feel, for the first time in weeks, that everything might be all right. They said hold, she replied. They did not say run. They did not say hide. They said hold. She turned to face Voss with tears forming in her eyes. Someone is coming to fight for us. I do not know how I know this, but I do. She transmitted the message to every hidden refugee ship, every resistance cell, every pocket of survivors across the occupied systems. The words spread in whispers and encrypted signals. Help was coming. The humans were coming. In his flagship above Palax Prime, Kethrava received the intercepted transmission from his intelligence officers. He read the 4 words and dismissed them with a contemptuous hiss. Humans, he said. A species of soft little creatures from a single minor system. What do they think they will accomplish? Should we investigate, Supreme Warlord? His officer asked. Why bother? We have crushed civilizations 1,000 times more powerful than these humans. If they are foolish enough to come here, They will die like all the others. He deleted the message and returned to the business of occupation on the refugee ship. Mira then sat by the communication console and waited. She did not know what the humans would bring. She did not know if they could truly challenge the Vethkai. She only knew that someone, somewhere, had heard their cry for help. Supreme Warlord Kethrava did not think about the human transmission for another 2 weeks. He had more important matters to attend to. The occupation of the Palax systems was proceeding smoothly. Resistance cells were being hunted down and destroyed. Labor quotas were being met. The conquered peoples were learning their place. Then his intelligence chief came to him with a report. Supreme Warlord, we have completed our analysis of the species that sent the transmission. The humans. Kethrava barely looked up from the tactical display he was studying. And they are insignificant. A young species, spacefaring for only 2 centuries. They control 43 star systems. Their total population is approximately 32 billion. Their military forces are small and have never been tested in a major conflict. As I thought, soft creatures making empty promises to the conquered. There is one thing of note, Supreme Warlord. The intelligence chief hesitated. Their homeworld is classified as a Category 12. Now Kethrava looked up. Category 12 was the highest danger rating for planetary environments. It meant a world with extreme conditions, constant natural disasters, and an ecosystem of deadly predators. Very few intelligent species evolved on such worlds. Those that did were usually either primitive or insane. A death world. Kethrava asked, "These soft little creatures come from a death world?" "Yes, Supreme Warlord. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, toxic atmosphere by most species standards, and an ecosystem filled with dangerous organisms. The humans themselves are pursuit predators who evolved to hunt by running their prey to exhaustion." Kethrava considered this. It was unusual, certainly, but it did not change the fundamental reality. The humans were young, weak, and few in number. They could not possibly challenge the Dominion. "Continue monitoring their space," he ordered. "If they send ships toward our territory, destroy them." "Yes, Supreme Warlord." 2 weeks later, human ships were detected at the edge of the Palax system. Commander Threll of the Scout Flotilla received the alert and immediately brought his fleet to battle stations. 15 Vethkai warships, each one a veteran of dozens of campaigns, moved to intercept the intruders. "How many enemy vessels?" he demanded. 12, Commander. All smaller than our cruisers. They are approaching at standard speed. Threll clicked his mandibles in contempt. 12 small ships against 15 Vethkai warships. These humans were either ignorant or suicidal. Open a channel. Let them hear their death sentence before they die. The communication officer established the connection. Threll leaned forward in his command chair and spoke. "Unidentified vessels. You have entered space claimed by the Vethkai Dominion. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning." There was a pause. Then a voice came back through the speakers. It was calm, almost pleasant, speaking in accented but clear galactic standard. "Vethkai vessels. This is Commander James Chen of the United Earth Navy. You have committed acts of war against civilian populations under our protection. You will withdraw from this system immediately and release all prisoners. This is your only opportunity to comply." Threll actually laughed. He could not remember the last time he had laughed. The absurdity of it was too much. 12 small ships, demanding that 15 Vethkai warships surrender. "Human Commander, you are either brave or stupid. Probably both. Your ships are outgunned and outnumbered. You have no chance of victory. Surrender now, and I will grant you a quick death." The human's response was simple. "You have been warned." Then the human ships began to move. Threll watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The enemy vessels were not forming a defensive formation. They were not trying to flee. They were accelerating directly toward his fleet at a rate that should have been impossible. "Commander, enemy acceleration is beyond our projections. They are closing faster than expected. Weapons free. Destroy them." The Vethkai ships opened fire. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked across space toward the approaching humans. It was the standard opening of a Vethkai engagement. Overwhelming firepower to break enemy formations and morale. The humans did not break. Thrall watched in disbelief as the human ships twisted through his barrage. They moved like living things, dodging plasma bolts that should have been impossible to avoid. Missiles that should have tracked them to destruction lost their locks and flew past harmlessly. How are they doing that? He demanded. No one had an answer. Then the humans returned fire. The first HFY cruiser died without warning. One moment it was firing its weapons. The next moment it simply came apart, cut in half by something that moved too fast to track. Thrall stared at the expanding debris cloud, where a ship of 300 warriors had been. What happened? What hit us? Unknown, Commander. We did not detect any incoming fire. A second cruiser exploded. Then a third. Thrall's tactical display was turning red with damage warnings and death notifications. His fleet was being torn apart, and he could not even see what was killing them. Evasive maneuvers. All ships scatter. The HFY vessels tried to break formation, to make themselves harder targets. It did not help. The human ships were faster, more agile, and their weapons could hit targets that were supposedly impossible to hit. Thrall finally saw one of the human projectiles on his sensors. It was a solid slug of metal, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. No shields in the galaxy could stop something moving that fast. No armor could withstand the impact. Railguns, his tactical officer whispered. They are using railguns. The power requirements alone should be. He never finished the sentence. A railgun slug tore through the bridge, and Commander Thrall ceased to exist. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 15 HFY warships had been reduced to scattered debris. Over 4,000 HFY warriors were dead. The 12 human ships continued toward the inner system without slowing down. Not one of them had been damaged. The refugee ship picked up the battle on their sensors. Mira then watched the tactical replay with her mouth open. That is impossible. Voss said beside her. No species fights like that. No species has weapons like that. The humans do, Mira replied. She watched the 12 human ships cruise past the wreckage of the HFY flotilla. They did not stop to salvage or take prisoners. They just kept moving, heading toward the occupied worlds, toward the people who had asked for help. On his flagship, Supreme Warlord Kethrava received the combat logs from the scout flotilla. Or rather, he received what remained of them. Most of the data had been lost when the ships were destroyed. He watched the fragmentary recordings 7 times. Each time, he saw the same thing. His ships firing, the humans dodging, his ships dying, the humans advancing. This is not possible, he said finally. His war council stood around him in silence. None of them had ever seen anything like this. None of them had any explanation. Their acceleration exceeds anything in our databases. One admiral said, their weapons penetrate our shields as if they do not exist. Their targeting systems predict our movements before we make them. How? Kethrava demanded. They are a young species. They should not have technology like this. Perhaps they found something. Another admiral suggested. Ancient technology from a dead civilization. It is the only explanation. It does not matter where they got it. What matters is that they have it. Kethrava stared at the frozen image of a human ship on the display. It was an ugly thing, all angles and hard edges, painted in dull gray. Nothing like the elegant curves of HFY vessels. But it had killed 300 warriors in seconds. Order the main fleet to converge on this system, he commanded. Every ship within range. I want 1,000 warships here within 10 days. 2,000, Supreme Warlord? For 12 enemy vessels? Those 12 vessels destroyed 15 of our ships without taking a scratch. I will not underestimate them again. We will crush them with overwhelming force. The admirals exchanged glances. This was unusual. The HFY had never needed such numbers against any enemy. But they had also never lost a battle so completely. It will be done. Supreme Warlord. As the War Council filed out, Kethrava remained at the display. Staring at the human ship for 300 years, he had known no fear. He had faced enemies that outnumbered him, enemies with superior technology, enemies that fought with desperate courage. He had defeated them all. Now, for the first time in his long life, he felt something cold settle into his chest, something unfamiliar and unwelcome. He refused to call it fear. HFY did not fear. Vethkai could not fear, but as he watched the human ships continue their slow advance toward his occupied worlds, he wondered if perhaps his people had simply never had a reason to learn dot in the refugee ship. Mira then broadcast the battle footage to every resistance cell in the Palax systems. The word spread like wildfire through the conquered populations that someone had fought the Vethkai. Someone had won dot in labor camps and shattered cities, in hidden basements and underground shelters. The people of Palax began to hope. They began to wait. The humans were coming, and they were not afraid. The news of the scout flotilla's destruction spread through the Vethkai occupation forces. Like a disease, warriors who had never questioned their own superiority now whispered to each other in dark corners. Officers who had led dozens of successful campaigns now studied their tactical displays. With new uncertainty, Supreme Warlord Kethrava ordered all discussion of the battle forbidden. Any warrior caught spreading rumors of defeat would be executed. But orders could not stop the truth from spreading. 15 ships destroyed. 0 human casualties. 11 minutes. Those numbers echoed through every barracks, every ship, every command post in the Palax systems. Kethrava threw himself into preparation for the coming confrontation. Ships from across Dominion space were converging on his position. 2,000 warships, the largest fleet the Vethkai had assembled in a century. Surely this would be enough. Surely no enemy, no matter how advanced, could stand against such overwhelming force. But late at night, alone in his quarters, the Supreme Warlord found himself watching the battle footage again and again. He studied every movement of the human ships, searching for weaknesses, patterns, anything he could exploit. He found nothing. The humans moved like they could see the future, like they knew exactly where every shot would go before it was fired. What were these creatures? Where had they come from? He ordered his intelligence cores to dig deeper into the human databases they had captured from Palax computer systems. What they found was disturbing. Humans had been waging war against each other since before they developed written language. Their entire history was a catalog of conflicts, each one more devastating than the last. They had developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in single explosions. They had created biological agents that could wipe out populations. They had built machines specifically designed to kill on a massive scale. And then, somehow, they had stopped. 3 centuries ago, humans had stood on the brink of self-annihilation. Their most powerful nations had aimed weapons of unimaginable destruction at each other. One mistake, one miscommunication, and their entire species would have been wiped out. Instead of destroying themselves, they had chosen to change. They had dismantled their weapons of mass destruction. They had created governments dedicated to peace. They had poured their intelligence and resources into exploration instead of conquest. They had become a species focused on building, rather than destroying, but they had not forgotten how to fight. The intelligence report noted that human military technology had continued to advance even during their era of peace. They had developed new weapons, new ships, new tactics. They had simply chosen not to use them. Their military was small, but incredibly advanced, designed to end conflicts quickly and decisively. Kethrava read this report and felt that cold sensation in his chest again. The Vethkai had built their entire civilization around war. Fighting was all they knew. They had never imagined that a species might choose peace while still being capable of devastating violence. It was like discovering that a gentle herbivore was actually a predator that had simply decided not to hunt. Meanwhile, the 12 human ships had reached the inner system. They took up position near Palax Prime and broadcast a message on all frequencies. The message was translated into every language spoken in the occupied territories. To the people of the Palax systems, this is Commander James Chen of the United Earth Navy. We have received your request for assistance. We are here to answer it. Shelter in place and avoid areas of military activity. We will do everything in our power to minimize civilian casualties. A second message followed, this one directed at the Vethkai forces. To the Vethkai Dominion, you have invaded sovereign territory and attacked civilian populations. You have been given the opportunity to withdraw peacefully. You refused. What follows is your responsibility. Any vessel that surrenders will be treated according to the laws of war. Any vessel that continues to fight will be destroyed. This is your final warning." Kethrava listened to the message with barely controlled rage. These humans, these insignificant creatures from a single system, dared to threaten the Vethkai Dominion? They had won a single skirmish against a scout force, and now they thought they could dictate terms? He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Supreme Warlord Kethrava. The enemy before us is dangerous, but not invincible. They won their first engagement through surprise and superior technology. We will not make that mistake again. We have 2,000 warships against their 12. We will overwhelm them with numbers they cannot match. We will destroy them, and then we will hunt down every human in existence." A roar of approval came back from 2,000 ships. The Vethkai were afraid, yes, but they were also angry. No species had ever humiliated them like this. No species had ever killed so many of their warriors so easily. They wanted revenge. "All ships, advance. Show these humans what it means to face the Dominion." The great fleet began to move. On the refugee ship, Mira then watched the Vethkai armada on her sensors. 2,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons. Each one crewed by hundreds of warriors who had never known defeat until now. And against them, 12 human ships. "They cannot win," Voss said quietly. "Even with their technology, the numbers are too great. They will be overwhelmed." Mira did not respond. She was watching the human ships, watching how they held position without retreating, without showing any sign of concern at the approaching wall of death. "They know the fleet is coming," she said. "They must have a plan." What plan could work against 2,000 ships? The answer came a moment later. Space rippled behind the human vessels. The ripples grew into tears in the fabric of reality itself. And through those tears came more ships. Mira watched her sensor display with growing astonishment as human vessels poured out of. Faster than light transit. They came in waves, dozens at a time, then hundreds. Heavy battleships bristling with weapons. Sleek destroyers that looked like knives made of metal. Carriers that disgorged swarms of smaller combat craft. How many? Voss whispered. The computer struggled to count. The number kept rising. 200, 400, 600. The final count was 847 combat vessels, plus another 200 support ships. Over 1,000 human ships had come to answer the call for help. They were waiting, Mira realized. The 12 ships were just the advance force. They were waiting to see what the Vethkai would do on his flagship. Kethrava stared at his tactical display in shock. The enemy fleet had appeared from nowhere, outnumbering his wildest estimates. And these were not the small ships they had fought before. Many of these vessels were as large as his own flagship. Some were larger. Where did they come from? He demanded. How did they get here without us detecting them? Their faster-than-light technology appears to be different from ours, Supreme Warlord. They can jump shorter distances with greater precision. They were hiding just outside the system, and we walked right into them. Kethrava understood now. The humans had planned this from the beginning. They had sent a small force to provoke a response, to make the Vethkai gather their fleet in one place. Then they had sprung the trap. It was exactly what a Vethkai commander would have done. Supreme Warlord, do we engage? Kethrava looked at the numbers on his display. 2,000 Vethkai ships against 1,000 human ships. The advantage was still his, and his warriors were demanding blood. All ships, attack formation. We still outnumber them. We will crush them through sheer force. The two fleets closed with each other across the cold void of space. In the refugee ship, Mira then held her breath. The largest battle in the history of the Palax systems was about to begin, and she could do nothing but watch. May whatever gods exist protect us all, Voss murmured. The first weapons fire lit up the darkness, and the war truly began. The battle began at 3 hours and 47 minutes after midnight, local Palax time. Supreme Warlord Kethrava had divided his fleet into 4 attack groups, each one approaching the human formation from a different angle. It was a classic Vethkai tactic, designed to split enemy fire and create confusion. It had worked against 100 different species. It did not work against the humans. The human fleet moved as if it were a single organism. Ships that should have required minutes to coordinate responded in seconds. Formations shifted and flowed like water. always presenting the optimal angle to incoming fire, always positioning for maximum effect. Kethrava watched his first attack group engage and felt his confidence crumble. His ships fired everything they had. Plasma bolts filled the void. Missiles streaked toward human vessels. Particle beams stabbed across the darkness. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The humans simply were not there when the weapons arrived. They dodged. They twisted. They accelerated in directions that should have been impossible. Ships that massed thousands of tons moved like small fighters, slipping between incoming fire with margins that could be measured in meters. And while they dodged, they returned fire. The railgun slugs were invisible until they hit. Kethrava watched a cruiser at the front of the formation simply disappear as a projectile moving at a quarter of light speed tore through it. The slug did not stop. It continued through empty space, hit the cruiser behind the first, and kept going. 3 ships died from a single shot. Concentrate fire on their lead vessels. Kethrava ordered. Overwhelm their ability to evade. The Vethkai tried. They focused the combined firepower of dozens of ships on single human targets. But the humans had an answer for that too. Their point defense systems were impossibly accurate, shooting down missiles and intercepting plasma bolts in flight. The few shots that got through seemed to slide off their shields without effect. The battle was 20 minutes old, and the Vethkai had already lost over 100 ships. The humans had lost 3. Kethrava began to understand that he was not fighting a battle. He was watching an execution. The human fleet was not just defending itself. It was hurting his ships, using their formations to create kill zones where railgun fire could pass through multiple targets. Vethkai commanders who tried to break formation were cut off and destroyed. Those who maintained formation were led into traps. "They know what we are going to do before we do it," his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "That is impossible, and yet it is happening. Their targeting computers predict our evasive maneuvers. Their fleet movements anticipate our tactical decisions. It is as if they have fought us 1,000 times and know every response we might make." Kethrava realized the truth then. The humans had been studying war while his people were still fighting with blades and poison. They had developed theories of combat, mathematics of warfare, predictions of enemy behavior. They had turned killing into a science. The Vethkai fought on instinct and aggression. The humans fought with knowledge and precision. Another 100 ships died in the next 10 minutes. Kethrava ordered a retreat. His admirals protested. The Vethkai did not retreat. The Vethkai had never retreated. "We retreat or we die," Kethrava snarled. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions around Palax Prime. Use the planet as a shield." The fleet tried to disengage. The humans did not let them. Human destroyers, faster than anything the Vethkai had ever faced, raced ahead of the retreating fleet and cut off escape routes. The larger human battleships advanced methodically, driving the Vethkai ships into ever smaller pockets where they could be destroyed in detail. Kethrava watched his fleet disintegrate. Ships he had commanded for decades, warriors he had known since they were hatchlings, all of them dying in the cold dark while the humans advanced without pause. 1 hour into the battle, the Vethkai fleet had been cut in half. The humans had lost 31 ships. Supreme Warlord, what were your orders? Kethrava looked at the tactical display. His remaining ships were scattered, disorganized, many of them damaged. The human fleet was closing in from all sides, methodically destroying everything in its path. He had one option left, one final tactic that might salvage something from this disaster. Order all ships to ram the enemy. If we cannot kill them with weapons, we will kill them with our hulls. The surviving Vethkai vessels turned toward the nearest human ships and accelerated to maximum speed. It was a desperate tactic, the final resort of a defeated fleet. But the Vethkai would rather die fighting than surrender. The humans saw them coming. Their ships simply moved aside. They were faster, more maneuverable, able to predict the ramming trajectories and avoid them with ease. Vethkai cruisers designed for speed found themselves chasing targets that stayed forever out of reach. And while they chased, the human weapons continued to fire. 2 hours into the battle, the Vethkai fleet ceased to exist as a fighting force. Of 2,000 warships that had begun the engagement, 47 remained. Most of them were damaged, their weapons destroyed, their engines crippled. They drifted in the wreckage of their comrades, waiting for death. On his flagship, Kethrava sat in his command chair and stared at nothing. The bridge around him was in ruins. Half the crew dead from a railgun near miss that had torn through the lower decks. Fires burned in the corridors. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning flesh. Supreme Warlord. His communications officer crawled toward him, blood streaming from a wound on his head. The humans are hailing us. They are. They are offering surrender terms. Surrender. The word had never been used in Vethkai space. For 300 years, they had been the ones demanding surrender from others. They had never imagined being on the other side. What are their terms? They say that any ship that powers down its weapons and engines will be spared. All crew will be taken prisoner and treated according to something they call the laws of war. Those who continue to fight will be destroyed. Kethrava looked at his tactical display. 47 ships, less than 3% of his fleet, the greatest military force his people had ever assembled. Reduced to scattered wreckage in 2 hours, the humans were not even damaged. Not really. They had lost a few ships, but their fleet remained essentially intact. They could continue this fight for as long as they wanted. Order all surviving ships to surrender. Kethrava said quietly. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. Supreme Warlord, do it. We cannot win. Further resistance will only waste Vethkai lives. The order went out. One by one, the surviving Vethkai ships powered down their weapons and waited for the humans to come. Kethrava sat in his ruined command chair and waited with them. In the space of 2 hours, everything he believed about the universe had been destroyed. The Vethkai were not invincible. They were not the supreme predators of the galaxy. They were simply a species that had never met a real challenge, until now. Human shuttles approached the crippled flagship. Kethrava could have ordered his crew to fight. They still had small arms, blades, their natural weapons. They could have killed some of the boarders before being overwhelmed. Instead, he ordered them to stand down. They have beaten us, he told his surviving warriors. Let us learn what kind of creatures they truly are. The airlock opened. Human soldiers entered the flagship, their weapons raised, their movements precise and controlled. They were so small. Kethrava could have killed any one of them with a single blow. But he had seen what their ships could do, what their weapons could do, and he knew that size meant nothing. A human officer approached him. She was female, with dark skin and close-cropped hair. She wore a uniform marked with symbols of rank that Kethrava did not recognize. Supreme Warlord Kethrava, she said, I am Commander Sero Conquo of the United Earth Navy. You are now a prisoner of war. You will be treated humanely, provided you cooperate. Do you understand? Kethrava understood, but understanding and accepting were different things. How? He asked, how did you do this? How could a species so young, so small, defeat the greatest military power in the galaxy? Commander Okonkwo looked at him for a long moment. Then she gestured for him to follow her. Come with me, she said. I will explain everything. The interrogation room aboard the human carrier was nothing like Kethrava expected. It was not a torture chamber. There were no instruments of pain, no devices designed to break the will. It was simply a room with 2 chairs and a table between them. Commander Sero Conquo sat across from him, her hands folded in front of her. She had removed her helmet, and he could see her face clearly now. It was an unremarkable face by human standards, he assumed. Dark eyes, strong features, a few scars that suggested she had seen combat before. You asked how we did this, she said. You asked how a young species could defeat the Vethkai. I will tell you. Kethrava waited. He had expected threats, demands, perhaps execution. He had not expected a conversation. Do you know what Earth is like? Okonkwo asked. Your home world. I have read the reports. High gravity, extreme conditions, a dangerous ecosystem. The reports do not capture it. Okonkwo leaned back in her chair. Earth tried to kill us every single day we existed. We evolved on a world of predators, diseases, natural disasters, and climates that could swing from burning heat to freezing cold in the span of a few months. 70% of our planet is covered in water that we cannot breathe. The air itself can become poisonous if the winds shift wrong. Earthquakes, hurricanes, wildfires, floods. Earth never stopped trying to wipe us out. And yet you survived. We did more than survive. We thrived. We became the dominant species on a planet that was actively hostile to our existence. Do you know how we did that? Kethrava shook his head. We became the best killers our world had ever seen. Okonkwo's voice was calm, matter of fact. She was not boasting. She was simply stating truth. We developed tools that let us kill from a distance. We developed strategies that let us hunt animals many times our size. We developed weapons that could destroy anything, anywhere, at any time. And then we turned those weapons on each other, on your own species, constantly. For thousands of years, we fought over territory, resources, ideology, religion, pride. We invented new ways to kill each other faster and more efficiently. We built armies of millions. We created weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single explosion. We refined warfare into a science, an art form, a way of life. Kethrava understood this. It was not so different from Vethkai history, but the Vethkai had turned their aggression outward, toward other species. The humans had turned it inward. We nearly destroyed ourselves, Okonkwo continued. 300 years ago, we stood at the edge of extinction. Our most powerful nations had weapons pointed at each other that could end all life on Earth. One mistake, one miscommunication, and everything we had built would have been reduced to ashes. But you stopped. We chose to stop. That is the important part. We looked at what we had become, at what we were about to do to ourselves, and we decided that there had to be another way. We built institutions to prevent war. We created agreements to limit weapons. We focused our intelligence on building instead of destroying, so you became peaceful. Okonkwo smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. No, we became careful. There is a difference. She leaned forward. We never forgot how to fight. We never stopped developing new weapons, new tactics, new technologies. We simply chose not to use them unless we had no other choice. Our military is small because we do not want to fight. But when we do fight, we fight to win quickly, decisively, and completely. You are saying that your species is more dangerous because you control your violence. I am saying that the Vethkai have never learned to fear yourselves. You have never stood on the edge of self-destructs and looked into the abyss. You fight because fighting is all you know. You have never had to develop restraint, strategy, efficiency. You just attack until your enemy breaks. Kethrava considered this. It was true. The Vethkai approach war as a simple equation. Apply force until the enemy surrenders or dies. It had always worked before. Our military doctrine is built on one principle, Okonkwo said. End conflicts as quickly as possible with minimal casualties on both sides. Every weapon we develop, every tactic we create, is designed to achieve that goal. We do not want prolonged wars. We do not want to grind down our enemies over years of fighting. We want to win immediately, and then stop. That is why you destroyed my fleet so quickly. Yes, we had years to study Vethkai tactics. We knew how you would fight before you did. Our computers predicted your maneuvers. Our weapons were designed to penetrate your defenses. Our ships were built to outperform yours in every way that mattered. She paused. We did not want this battle. We gave you multiple opportunities to withdraw. You refused. The Vethkai do not retreat. And now most of your fleet is debris and your warriors are prisoners. Was that pride worth the cost? Kethrava had no answer. What happens now? He asked instead. Now you face justice. The Vethkai Dominion has committed crimes against dozens of species, invasions, occupations, mass killings, forced labor. Those crimes will be documented and judged. And my people, will you destroy us as we destroyed others? Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. No, that is not what humans do. Not anymore. Why not? You have the power. You have proven that you can defeat us. Why not finish what you started? Because destroying you would not solve anything. It would just create another cycle of violence, another species seeking revenge, another war in 100 years. We learned that lesson the hard way. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the wreckage of the Vethkai fleet drifted in the darkness. Beyond it, Palax Prime turned slowly, its people waiting to learn their fate. The Vethkai will lose their fleet, Okonkwo said. Your military will be dismantled. Your conquered territories will be freed. But your people will survive. Your homeworld will not be touched. You will be given the chance to become something other than conquerors. And if we refuse, if we rebuild and attack you again, then we will destroy you again, and again, and again. As many times as it takes. She turned to face him. But we hope it will not come to that. We hope that someday, the Vethkai will look at what they have done and choose to change as we did. Kethrava thought about everything she had said. About humans who had nearly destroyed themselves and chosen to stop. About a species that had developed the most devastating weapons in the galaxy, and then decided not to use them. About mercy extended to an enemy that deserved none. I do not understand, he admitted. You could rule this galaxy. You could conquer every species in existence. Why do you not? Okonkwo smiled again, but this time it was different. Softer, almost sad. Because that is not who we want to be anymore. We spent thousands of years being conquerors. It brought us nothing but suffering. Now we want to build something better. We want to explore the stars, meet new species, learn new things. We want to help those who need help and protect those who cannot protect themselves. And when someone like the Vethkai threatens that, then we become what we used to be. Briefly, reluctantly, and only long enough to end the threat. Her eyes met his. We take no joy in killing, but we are very, very good at it. It is better for everyone if we are never forced to prove that again. Kethrava understood then. The humans were not peaceful because they were weak. They were peaceful because they were strong. So strong that they could afford to be gentle. So confident in their power that they did not need to prove it constantly through conquest. It was a kind of strength the Vethkai had never imagined. In the weeks that followed, the human fleet liberated the Palax systems. Occupation forces surrendered or were destroyed. Labor camps were opened. Prisoners were freed. The peoples who had suffered under Vethkai rule began the long process of rebuilding. Mira then stood on the steps of the Palax Parliament building. The same steps where Kethrava had declared victory just months before. Around her, crowds of every species celebrated their freedom. Above them, human ships patrolled the sky. Keeping watch, Voss stood beside her. Looking up at the gray warships with an expression of wonder. They could have demanded anything. He said, they could have made us serve them as we served the Vethkai. Instead, they just left patrols to protect us while we rebuild. That is what they do. Mira replied. They help, they protect, and then they move on. Why? Mira thought about everything she had learned about humans in the past months. Their history of violence and their choice to change. Their terrible weapons and their refusal to use them except in defense of others. Their power and their restraint, because they remember what it was like to be afraid, she said. And they do not want anyone else to feel that way. Across the Orion Arm, word spread about what had happened in the Palax systems. Species that had cowered before the Vethkai heard that the great predators had been humbled. Civilizations that had given up hope learned that someone had come to help, and everywhere. The message was the same. The humans are small. The humans are quiet. The humans prefer peace. But if you harm the innocent, if you threaten those who cannot defend themselves, if you believe that your power makes you untouchable, then the humans will come. They will come without anger, without hatred, without desire for conquest, and they will end you, not because they want to, because someone has to, and nobody does it better.